He married an obese alien to escape poverty and win a spaceship, but she locked him in on... Captain Clyde Sutton stared at the contract on the holographic display, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. The terms were clear and clearly desperate. Marriage to an alien aristocrat in exchange for a state-of-the-art interstellar vessel and enough credits to clear his family's crushing debt. His father's medical bills had piled up faster than their ability to pay them, and the collectors were threatening to seize their home. "You have 24 hours to decide, Captain Sutton," said Admiral Thornton, his weathered face betraying no emotion through the comm screen. "The Valerians are insistent on having a decorated human officer for this arrangement. Your combat record makes you an ideal candidate." Clyde ran a hand through his short brown hair. "With all due respect, sir, I'm being asked to sell myself like some kind of prize stallion." "With all due respect, Captain," Thornton countered, "you're being offered a way out of financial ruin and a chance to own one of the finest ships in the quadrant. The Valerian noble houses have more wealth than most human colonies combined. This is a diplomatic opportunity as well as a personal one." Clyde glanced at the attached image of his prospective bride, Lady Arella Voss of House Keldor. She was unmistakably Valerian, with her azure skin and silver-white hair. But unlike the willowy frames typical of her species, Lady Arella was substantial. Her voluptuous figure strained against the ornate, metallic bodysuit that was traditional formal wear for Valerian nobility. "And what happens after the ceremony?" Clyde asked. "You receive the ship, the credits, and you're free to go about your business. The Valerians understand this is a marriage of convenience. They gain status by having a human war hero in their family records. You get your ship, everyone wins. Except I have to spend a week with her for appearances." "1 week," Thornton confirmed. "Then you can be on your way." Clyde closed his eyes. A week of his life and his signature on a marriage document in exchange for his family's security and his own freedom. It was a devil's bargain, but what choice did he have? "I'll do it," he said finally. "Send the coordinates." 3 days later, Clyde stood in the grand ceremonial hall of the Valerian diplomatic vessel Celestial Accord, dressed in his formal military uniform with all decorations displayed as requested. The hall was filled with blue-skinned Valerian dignitaries, their slender forms making Lady Arella stand out even more as she approached in a flowing silver gown that did little to conceal her ample curves. Up close, Clyde could see that her eyes were a deeper blue than her skin, like sapphires catching starlight. Her face was elegantly structured with high cheekbones and full lips that curved into a practiced smile. "Captain Sutton," she said, her voice surprisingly melodic, "I appreciate your acceptance of our arrangement." "Lady Arella," he responded with a formal bow, "the pleasure is mine." The ceremony was mercifully brief, a blend of human and Valerian traditions. Clyde repeated the words as instructed, signed the documents, and before he knew it, they were legally bound. A cheer went up from the assembled Valerians, and servants began distributing drinks. "Your new vessel awaits your inspection, Captain," Arella said, gesturing toward a viewing port where a sleek silver ship hung against the backdrop of stars. "The Stellar Venture, one of our finest courier vessels, modified for human operation." Clyde couldn't help but be impressed. The ship was everything promised, compact but powerful, with lines that suggested both speed and endurance. It was worth every moment of this charade. "And now," Arella continued, "we should retire to our quarters. It has been a long day." Clyde followed her through ornate corridors to a luxurious suite aboard the Stellar Venture itself. The main cabin was spacious, with a large viewport showing the stars beyond. A single oversized bed dominated one wall. "Your ship is impressive," Clyde said, trying to maintain polite conversation while planning his exit strategy. 1 week, then freedom. "Our ship," Arella corrected, activating a control panel. The door to the cabin slid shut with an ominous hiss, followed by the unmistakable sound of a security lock engaging. Clyde spun around. "What are you doing?" Arella's diplomatic smile transformed into something more cunning. "Just making sure you fulfill your end of the deal, Captain Sutton." She settled into a plush chair, crossing her legs. "You didn't think we'd simply hand over a vessel of this caliber without ensuring the contract was properly honored, did you?" "The contract said nothing about being locked in," Clyde growled, moving to the door and confirming it wouldn't budge. "The contract stipulates 1 week of marital cohabitation she replied calmly. "I'm merely ensuring compliance." Clyde felt the trap closing around him. "So, I'm a prisoner?" "Not at all. You're a husband." Her smile widened. "For 1 week, at least. Then you're free to go wherever you wish with your new ship and your payment." Clyde stared at the locked door, then back at his new bride. Her eyes glittered with amusement at his predicament. 1 week with this woman. 1 week locked in this gilded cage. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. 1 week, then I'm gone." "Of course," Arla agreed, her voice honey-sweet. "That was always the arrangement." As Clyde looked out the viewport at the stars beyond, stars he'd soon be free to navigate, he couldn't shake the feeling that Lady Erla Voss had plans he couldn't begin to fathom. Clyde spent the first hour of his confinement methodically examining every panel and access point in their shared quarters. Arela watched with amusement from a plush settee, sipping from a crystal glass filled with iridescent blue liquid. "The security systems were designed by the finest Valerian engineers," she commented. "Even with your impressive military background, I doubt you'll find a weakness." Clyde shot her a glare. "You've done your research." "Thoroughly." She set down her glass. 3 combat tours on the Centauri front. Commendations for valor during the Arcturus skirmish. Expert in tactical operations and ship-to-ship combat. Her sapphire eyes sparkled. "You're quite the specimen, Captain Sutton." "And you're quite the jailer, Lady Erla." She laughed, the sound surprisingly melodic. "A jailer?" "Hardly. This is the finest suite on the vessel. The food synthesizer is programmed with over 1,000 recipes from across the galaxy. The entertainment system contains more media than you could consume in a lifetime." She gestured to a door on the far wall. "And that leads to a private bathing chamber that would make Earth's finest spas envious." Clyde crossed his arms. A gilded cage is still a cage. 1 week in luxury before you gain your freedom and wealth. Erla rose from her seat, her curves shifting beneath the silver fabric of her gown. Many would consider that a fair trade. Before Clyde could respond, a piercing alarm cut through the cabin. The lighting shifted to a pulsing red, and a holographic display materialized above the central table. "Proximity alert," Erla said, suddenly all business, huh? She moved to the display with surprising grace for her size, fingers dancing across the controls. 3 vessels on intercept course. Clyde was at her side instantly, military training overriding his annoyance. "Configuration?" "Krell gunships," she replied, her voice tight. "Mercenaries from the Outer Rim." The display showed 3 predatory-looking vessels, their hulls adorned with the distinctive barbed protrusions that mark Krell warcraft. They were arranged in a classic pincer formation, cutting off potential escape vectors. "They're hailing us," Erla said, tapping a control. A harsh, guttural voice filled the cabin. "Vessel Stellar Venture, this is Commander Vrak of House Thrax. Surrender Lady Erla Voss immediately or be destroyed." Erla's face hardened. "House Thrax," she muttered. "They've opposed the human Valerian alliance from the beginning. And now they're making their move," Clyde said, studying the tactical display. "Those gunships outgun us 3-1. Erla deactivated the communication channel before responding. "The Stellar Venture has defensive capabilities beyond its apparent specifications." She turned to Clyde, her expression serious. "But I need your expertise to utilize them effectively." "So you're unlocking the door?" Clyde asked, raising an eyebrow. "The ship's systems can be controlled from here," she replied, gesturing to the holographic interface. "But I need your tactical mind." The Krell commander's voice boomed through the cabin again. "Your silence is taken as refusal. Prepare to be boarded." Clyde studied the approaching vessels, mind racing through combat scenarios. "Why target you specifically?" "This seems excessive for simple opposition to an alliance." Erla's eyes met his. "House Thrax stands to lose significant mining rights if the treaty accompanying our marriage is ratified. My family has championed cooperation with humans since first contact." "And a dead bride would certainly complicate the treaty," Clyde concluded. He stepped closer to the controls. "What defensive systems are we working with?" Erla's fingers danced across the interface, revealing schematics that made Clyde whistle in appreciation. The Stellar Venture wasn't just a courier vessel, it was a disguised warship with cutting-edge Valerian technology. You never intended for me to just fly away, did you? Clyde asked, glancing sideways at her. Let's focus on surviving first, she replied, not quite answering his question. Then you can decide whether to leave or not. The ship shuddered as the first volley from the Krell vessels struck their shields. Shield integrity at 87%, an automated voice announced. Clyde studied the tactical display, noting the Krell formation and weapon signatures. His military training took over as he began inputting commands. Divert auxiliary power to the port shield array, he ordered, and charge the ventral pulse cannons, but hold fire. Erla followed his instructions without question, her movements efficient and practiced. They worked in unexpected synchronicity, anticipating each other's needs as the stellar venture maneuvered to face the threat. They're moving to surround us, Erla noted, as the enemy vessels adjusted their approach. Exactly as I expected, Clyde replied with a grim smile. When I give the word, execute a full reverse thrust and fire all forward batteries. The ship rocked again as another barrage struck their shields. Shields at 62%, the computer reported. They're herding us toward that asteroid field, Erla observed, trying to limit our maneuverability. Let them think it's working, Clyde said, fingers flying across the controls. On my mark. The lead Krell vessel moved directly into their path, weapons glowing as they prepared another salvo. Now, Clyde commanded. The stellar venture lurched as its engines fired in reverse, catching the Krell ships off guard. The forward batteries unleashed a devastating barrage that struck the lead vessel squarely on its unshielded flank. Direct hit, Erla exclaimed as the enemy ship listed to one side, venting atmosphere. The other two Krell vessels broke formation, attempting to regroup. Clyde seized the opportunity, inputting a series of complex maneuvers that sent the stellar venture into a tight spiral between them. They're targeting our engines, Erla warned. Let them try, Clyde replied, his focus absolute. He felt a surge of exhilaration. This was what he was born to do. For several tense minutes, the space around them lit up with weapons fire as Clyde outmaneuvered the mercenary vessels. The stellar venture danced between asteroid fragments and energy blasts, responding to his commands with precision that surpassed any ship he'd previously piloted. Finally, one of the Krell ships erupted in a spectacular explosion after a perfectly timed shot from the Venture's aft cannons. The remaining vessel, seeing its companions defeated, abruptly broke off the attack and accelerated away. They're retreating, Erla said, her voice filled with relief and admiration. Clyde leaned back from the controls, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He turned to find Erla looking at him with newfound respect. That, she said softly, was extraordinary. But for the first time since their meeting, Clyde felt something other than resentment toward his blue-skinned bride. She had remained calm under fire, followed his instructions perfectly, and shown genuine skill at the ship's systems. You handle yourself well in a crisis, he acknowledged. A small smile played at her lips. As do you, Captain Sutton. Perhaps this arrangement won't be quite as tedious as you feared. The moment was interrupted by another alarm, this one more urgent than the first. The damaged Krell vessel, Erla said, turning back to the display. It's on a collision course. Impact in 47 seconds, Erla's fingers flew across the holographic controls, her earlier composure giving way to urgent focus. Clyde analyzed the trajectory data. We can't outrun it. The engines took too much damage in the firefight. Emergency protocols initiated, announced the ship's AI in a calm, feminine voice that contrasted sharply with their dire situation, recommending immediate evacuation to command deck. Erla pressed her palm against a hidden panel beside the main display. The locked door to their quarters slid open with a pneumatic hiss. So much for our cozy confinement, she said with a wry smile. Follow me. They sprinted through the corridor, the ship's warning klaxons blaring around them. Clyde noted the elegant design of the passageways, far more spacious and ornate than typical military vessels he'd served on. Despite her fuller figure, Erla moved with surprising agility, leading him through a maze of corridors with confident precision. Impact in 30 seconds, the AI warned. Almost there, Erla called over her shoulder as they rounded a corner. The command deck doors parted automatically as they approached. Clyde halted momentarily at the threshold, taking in the bridge's layout. Unlike the utilitarian design of human military vessels, the Stellar Ventures Command Center was a harmonious blend of function and aesthetic beauty. Curved control stations faced a panoramic viewport that currently displayed the rapidly approaching Krell vessel. Impact in 20 seconds. Erla slid into the captain's chair at the center of the bridge, activating systems with practiced efficiency. "Take tactical," she ordered, pointing to a station to her right. Clyde complied without hesitation, military training overriding any lingering resentment about their arrangement. The tactical console lit up beneath his touch, displaying weapons and defensive systems far beyond what he had been able to access from their quarters. "Diverting all power to forward shields," he announced, fingers dancing across the interface. "Initiating emergency thrusters," Erla responded, gripping the manual flight controls that had extended from her command chair. "Impact in 10 seconds. The view screen showed the crippled Krell vessel tumbling toward them, trailing debris and venting plasma. Its jagged, predatory design now seemed pathetic in its death throes. "Brace!" Erla shouted. The Stellar Venture lurched violently as Erla fired a precise sequence of thruster bursts. Instead of attempting to outrun the collision, she rotated the ship to present its most heavily shielded section to the oncoming threat, while simultaneously shifting their position just enough to avoid a direct hit. The Krell ship scraped along their starboard hull with a deafening screech of metal on metal. The bridge lights flickered as power surged through damaged systems. Clyde was nearly thrown from his station, but managed to maintain his position, continuing to route power to critical systems. "Hull breach on decks 4 through 6, the AI reported. "Emergency containment fields holding." As the Krell vessel passed by, Erla executed a final thruster burst that pushed them clear of the debris field. The damaged mercenary ship continued its tumble into space, eventually detonating in a brilliant flash as its power core destabilized. For a moment, silence reigned on the bridge, broken only by the hiss of environmental systems compensating for the damage. "Damage report," Erla finally requested, her voice steady, despite the beads of sweat visible on her blue forehead. "Multiple hull breaches, but containment fields are functioning," Clyde reported, scanning the tactical readouts. "Weapon systems at 40% capacity, shields at 32%, main engines operating at reduced efficiency." Erla nodded, then turned her command chair to face him directly. "Not bad for our first date, wouldn't you say, Captain?" Despite himself, Clyde felt a smile tug at his lips. "I've had worse." She laughed, a genuine sound of relief and amusement that somehow lightened the tension in the room. "I'm sure you have." Clyde rose from the tactical station to get a better view of their surroundings through the main viewport. The stars stretched endlessly before them, untroubled by the violence that had just occurred. "So," he said, turning back to Erla, "care to explain why your courier vessel is equipped with military-grade weapon systems and why mercenaries are trying to kill us?" Erla's expression grew more serious. "House Thrax has opposed the Human-Valerian alliance from the beginning. They control significant mining operations in the Outer Rim and fear human competition." She rose from her chair, her curves shifting beneath her silver gown as she approached a secondary console. "As for the ship, let's just say my family believes in being prepared." "Prepared for what?" "War. Captain Sutton." She activated a holographic display showing a star chart with various markers indicating fleet positions. "The alliance between our peoples isn't merely diplomatic. There are forces gathering beyond the Outer Rim, forces that threaten both humans and Valerians alike." Clyde studied the display, his military mind immediately grasping the strategic implications. The Krell aren't acting alone. "They're mercenaries for hire," Erla confirmed. "The real threat remains in the shadows." For now, she turned to face him fully, her sapphire eyes meeting his with unexpected intensity. "Our marriage was arranged not just for show or status, Captain. It was the first step in a joint military operation. Your tactical expertise combined with Valerian technology." Clyde felt a surge of anger. "Admiral Thornton knew this, didn't he? This wasn't just about clearing my family's debts." "The Admiral understands the bigger picture," Erla replied diplomatically, "but the choice was always yours. The debt relief and ship ownership are genuine. You could still take the Stellar Venture and leave once our week is complete, assuming we survive that long. Clyde ran a hand through his short hair, processing this new information. So I'm not just a trophy husband, I'm a military asset. You're both, Arilla said with surprising candor. My family gains status through our union, yes, but we also gain your tactical mind, which you've already demonstrated is exceptional. She gestured to the viewport where the remnants of the Krell ship still glittered among the stars. Few could have handled that situation as effectively. Before Clyde could respond, a proximity alert sounded again. His head snapped toward the tactical display, expecting more hostiles, but Arilla raised a calming hand. Friendly signatures, she said. Valerian Defense Fleet responding to our distress beacon. 3 sleek vessels appeared on the long-range scanners, their distinctive silhouettes marking them as Valerian military cruisers. Perfect timing, Clyde muttered. Indeed, Arilla agreed, returning to her command chair. Though I must admit, I rather enjoyed watching you work. A hint of that earlier playful smile returned to her lips. Perhaps being locked in together won't be such a hardship after all. Despite his lingering frustration at being manipulated, Clyde couldn't help but appreciate her resilience and candor. There was more to Lady Arilla Voss than met the eye, and perhaps more to their arrangement than he'd initially believed. The Valerian flagship Astral Dominion dwarfed the stellar venture as it docked in the massive vessel's central bay. Clyde stood at the viewport, watching as mechanical arms secured their damaged ship while repair drones swarmed over the hull breaches like metallic insects. Impressive, he admitted as Arilla joined him, now dressed in a formal gown of midnight blue that complemented her azure skin. The garment hugged her generous curves before flowing to the floor in a cascade of shimmering fabric. Wait until you see the reception hall, she replied, adjusting a silver circlet in her elaborately styled hair. Valerian formal events are elaborate. Clyde tugged uncomfortably at the collar of his dress uniform. Admiral Thornton had apparently anticipated this scenario. A complete formal kit had been packed among his belongings. I'm not exactly looking forward to being paraded around as your trophy husband. Arilla's eyes sparkled with amusement. On the contrary, Captain. After your performance against the Krell, you'll be the hero of the evening. She stepped closer, straightening his already immaculate collar. The brave human warrior who saved a Valerian noble from certain death. Her proximity sent an unexpected jolt through Clyde. The floral scent of her perfume mingled with something more primal, a subtle pheromone perhaps, unique to her species. He cleared his throat and stepped back. Just tell me what I need to know to avoid causing an interstellar incident. Arilla smiled knowingly at his retreat. Valerian social protocol is complex, but I'll guide you through it. The most important thing to remember is that we must appear genuinely affectionate. Physical contact between bonded pairs is expected. Define physical contact, Clyde said warily. Hand-holding at minimum. Perhaps the occasional embrace. Her smile turned mischievous. Nothing that would scandalize your human sensibilities, I assure you. A chime announced the arrival of their escort. The doors slid open to reveal a tall, slender Valerian male in an ornate military uniform. Lady Arilla, he said with a formal bow. Captain Sutton, I am Commander Talon, assigned to escort you to the reception. Arilla took Clyde's arm, pressing her soft curves against his side with deliberate pressure. We're ready, Commander. They followed Talon through corridors that grew increasingly grand, eventually arriving at a massive set of doors inlaid with what appeared to be genuine silver. As they approached, the doors parted to reveal a spectacle that momentarily took Clyde's breath away. The reception hall was a vast chamber with a domed ceiling that somehow projected the surrounding star field, giving the impression that they were dining in open space. Hundreds of Valerians in formal attire mingled beneath floating orbs of soft light, while anti-gravity platforms carried musicians playing exotic instruments unlike anything Clyde had seen on Earth. Damn, he whispered. Indeed, Arilla agreed, tightening her grip on his arm. Remember, you're not just my husband tonight. You're the representative of humanity. As they entered, a hush fell over the crowd. All eyes turned toward them, and Clyde felt a moment of self-consciousness. He stood a head shorter than most of the male Valerians, though his broader, more muscular build made him appear more substantial despite the height difference. A Valerian in elaborate ceremonial robes approached, flanked by what appeared to be high-ranking military officers. "High Chancellor Morath," Erla whispered, "the highest-ranking official present. Follow my lead." She performed an elegant curtsy, and Clyde executed his best military bow. "Lady Erla," the Chancellor intoned in a resonant voice, "we rejoice at your safe arrival." His pale blue eyes shifted to Clyde. "And this is the human warrior who defeated the Krell ambush?" "My husband, Captain Clyde Sutton," Erla confirmed, a note of pride in her voice that sounded surprisingly genuine. The Chancellor studied Clyde with undisguised curiosity. "Remarkable. We received the tactical data from your encounter. Your species' combat instincts are impressive." "Just doing my job, sir," Clyde replied, falling back on military formality. "Modesty," the Chancellor observed. "Another curious human trait." He gestured to the gathering. "Tonight we celebrate your union and the alliance it represents. Enjoy our hospitality." As the Chancellor moved away, Erla guided Clyde through the crowd. They were approached by countless Valerian nobles and officials, each seemingly more curious about the human than the last. "Is it true humans can sustain combat readiness for days without rest?" asked one military commander. "Do you really consume the flesh of other species for sustenance?" inquired a wide-eyed noble lady, both horrified and fascinated. "I heard humans mate for pleasure rather than just reproduction. Is this accurate?" questioned an elderly Valerian scientist, peering at Clyde through some kind of monocle. Clyde fielded each question with as much diplomacy as he could muster, increasingly aware of Erla's amused expression beside him. She remained pressed against his side, occasionally stroking his arm or leaning her head against his shoulder in displays of affection that seemed calculated to appear natural. As the evening progressed, servers circulated with exotic foods and glowing beverages. Clyde cautiously sampled a few, finding some delicious and others nearly inedible to his human palate. "You're doing wonderfully," Erla murmured during a rare moment when they weren't surrounded by curious Valerians. "They're absolutely fascinated by you." "Like a zoo exhibit?" Clyde muttered, though without real bitterness. The attention was overwhelming, but not entirely unpleasant. "More like a legendary creature come to life," she corrected, guiding him toward a quieter corner of the hall. "Humans have a reputation among my people. Resilient, adaptable, unpredictable." Her eyes met his with unexpected intensity. "Passionate." The way she said the last word sent a warmth through Clyde that had nothing to do with the alien beverages he'd consumed. Before he could respond, the music changed to something slower, more melodic. "Ah, the bonding dance," Erla said. "Newly joined couples are expected to participate." "I'm not much of a dancer," Clyde warned as she led him toward the center of the hall, where other couples were gathering. "Just follow my lead," she replied, placing his hand on the curve of her waist. "It's simple enough." The dance was indeed straightforward, a slow, graceful movement in circular patterns. What wasn't simple was maintaining his composure with Erla's body pressed against his, her curves soft yet firm beneath the silken fabric of her gown. The subtle scent of her grew stronger as her body temperature rose with the dance, and Clyde found himself responding to her proximity in ways he hadn't anticipated. "Your heart rate has increased, Captain," she observed quietly, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "Are you finding our charade difficult to maintain?" "Just trying not to step on your feet," he deflected, though they both knew it was a lie. As they moved across the floor, Clyde became aware that they were being observed with particular interest. Not just with curiosity, but with approval. "They're watching us," he murmured. "Of course they are," Erla replied. "We're the symbol of everything this alliance promises. Strength through unity, beauty in diversity." Her hand slid up his chest to rest over his heart. "The perfect diplomatic match." The music swelled, and Erla pressed even closer, her face tilted up toward his. For a moment, Clyde forgot about the audience, the arrangement, the contract that had brought them together. He saw only the intelligent, courageous woman who had fought beside him, who had trusted his judgment in battle without hesitation. When the dance ended, they remained locked in their embrace for a heartbeat longer than necessary, something unspoken passing between them. The spell was broken by the approach of Commander Talon, his expression grave despite the festive surroundings. "Lady Arilla, Captain Sutton," he said with a formal bow, "your presence is requested in the Strategic Command Center. Immediately." The Strategic Command Center of the Astral Dominion was a stark contrast to the opulent reception hall. Utilitarian and efficient, its circular design centered around a massive holographic display, currently showing star charts and fleet positions. High-ranking Valerian officers stood in tense clusters, their formal attire at odds with the military setting. High Chancellor Morath nodded gravely as Clyde and Arilla entered. "Captain Sutton, Lady Arilla, thank you for joining us promptly." "What's happened?" Arilla asked, her hand still resting on Clyde's arm. The Chancellor gestured to the central display. "We've intercepted communications between House Thrax and someone aboard this vessel." His pale eyes swept the room. "Someone with access to classified intelligence regarding your route and the strategic importance of your union?" Clyde felt Arilla stiffen beside him. "A traitor," she said, her voice hardening. "Indeed," Morath confirmed. "The communications were heavily encrypted, but our analysts determined they originated from the diplomatic corps." He turned to Clyde. "Captain Sutton, your tactical expertise against the Krell was impressive. We would value your perspective on this matter." Clyde stepped forward, studying the data displayed. "Have you identified the specific transmission point?" "We've narrowed it to the diplomatic wing, but precise identification has proven challenging," responded a severe-looking Valerian officer. "Whoever sent these communications used sophisticated counter-detection methods." Clyde nodded, military training taking over. "I'd suggest a compartmentalized investigation. Restrict information flow, feed different data to different departments, see which version reaches House Thrax." The Valerian officers exchanged impressed glances. "A human honey trap," one murmured appreciatively. "Additionally," Clyde continued, "the traitor will likely attempt to contact their handlers again, especially after our survival of the Krell attack. We should monitor all outgoing communications, particularly any using non-standard channels." Chancellor Morath nodded approvingly. "Your species' natural paranoia serves you well in security matters, Captain Sutton." He turned to address the assembled officers. "Implement these measures immediately." As the officers dispersed to their tasks, Morath approached Clyde and Arilla more privately. "There is another matter we must discuss," he said, his voice lowered. "The attack on your vessel has accelerated our timeline. The formal alliance ceremony must proceed without delay." Arilla's grip on Clyde's arm tightened. "The bonding of souls ritual? But that requires weeks of preparation." "We have no weeks," Morath replied grimly. "The ritual must be performed tomorrow." Clyde looked between them, sensing he was missing something significant. "What exactly does this ritual entail?" Arilla turned to him, her expression a mix of concern and something more complex. "It's an ancient Valerian tradition. For political unions to be recognized as binding by all houses, the couple must demonstrate their compatibility." "Compatibility," Clyde repeated flatly. "That sounds suspiciously vague." Chancellor Morath's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "The ritual tests physical, mental, and spiritual harmony between bonded pairs. It is intimate by both human and Valerian standards." Clyde felt heat rise to his face as understanding dawned. "You're saying we have to demonstrate your union's validity," Morath finished smoothly, "before witnesses from all major houses?" "Witnesses?" Clyde choked. Arilla placed a calming hand on his chest. "Not in the way you're imagining. The physical aspects are conducted in private. The witnesses observe only the ceremonial elements and the final confirmation, which is a biochemical analysis that confirms mutual satisfaction," she explained, her blue cheeks darkening to a deeper shade that Clyde realized must be the Valerian equivalent of a blush. Chancellor Morath cleared his throat. "I understand this may conflict with human customs, Captain Sutton, but the ritual is essential to solidify the alliance. Without it, conservative elements within our society could challenge the legitimacy of your union, and by extension, the military cooperation it represents." Clyde ran a hand through his hair, processing this new complication. What had begun as a simple transaction, marriage for money and a ship, had evolved into something far more complex. Now he was expected to consummate the union as a part of an alien ritual with political ramifications. He glanced at Erla, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. Despite his initial resentment of their arrangement, he couldn't deny the attraction that had been building between them. Their shared battle against the Krell, the dance they just shared, there was a genuine connection forming, unexpected but undeniable. "I need to speak with Lady Erla privately," Clyde finally said. Chancellor Morath nodded. "Of course. You may use my personal chamber adjacent to the command center." He gestured toward a door at the far side of the room. I must coordinate the investigation into our traitor. We will speak again before the ritual tomorrow." As the Chancellor departed, Clyde and Arilla made their way to the indicated chamber, a small but elegantly appointed room clearly designed for private diplomatic conversations. The door had barely closed behind them when Arilla spoke. "I understand if this changes things for you, Clyde. The ritual wasn't supposed to happen so soon. You weren't supposed to know that our fake marriage would require real intimacy?" Clyde finished, unable to keep a note of accusation from his voice. Erla sank onto a cushioned bench, her formal gown pooling around her. "The contract you signed included provisions for all traditional ceremonies. The details were deliberately vague." "Another manipulation," Clyde said, pacing the small room. "Like being locked in our quarters. Like being chosen for my tactical skills rather than just as a convenient human." "Yes," she admitted without pretense, but not entirely. She rose and moved to stand before him, stopping his pacing with a gentle hand on his chest. "You were selected for many reasons, Clyde. Your military record, yes. Your financial situation that made you amenable to the arrangement, yes." Her sapphire eyes held his. "But also because when our intelligence services compiled psychological profiles of potential candidates, you showed something rare." "What's that?" "Adaptability. Openness beneath your disciplined exterior, the capacity to see beyond your own cultural limitations." Her hand slid up to rest against his cheek. "The potential to genuinely care for someone different from yourself." The sincerity in her voice caught him off guard. "And what about you? Was this all just duty to your house and species?" Erla's lips curved in a small smile. "Initially, perhaps. I am a daughter of House Voss. Duty is in my blood." Her thumb traced the line of his jaw. "But I didn't expect to admire your courage. I didn't expect to enjoy your company. And I certainly didn't expect to feel this attraction." The last word hung between them, charged with possibility. Clyde was acutely aware of her proximity, the warmth of her body, the subtle scent that seemed to cloud his judgment whenever she was near. "The ritual," he said, his voice rougher than intended, "what exactly does it involve?" "There are ceremonial elements, vows, symbolic gestures." Her eyes never left his. "But at its core, it's about genuine connection, physical and emotional harmony. It cannot be faked, Clyde. The biochemical analysis would reveal any inadequacy. So tomorrow, we either truly connect or the alliance fails." "Yes," she said simply. Clyde took a deep breath, weighing his options. He could refuse, take his ship once repairs were complete, and leave this political quagmire behind. His family's debts would still be cleared as promised. He could return to his life, but as he looked at Erla, this complex, intelligent woman who had fought beside him, who had shown both cunning and courage, he realized that the thought of leaving no longer held the appeal it once did. "If we do this," he said slowly, "I need to know it's real. Not just political, not just duty." Erla stepped closer, eliminating the last space between them. "Then perhaps we should practice," she whispered, rising on her toes to bring her lips to his. The kiss began tentatively, a question rather than a demand. But as Clyde responded, wrapping his arms around her generous curves, it deepened into something neither of them had anticipated when their arrangement began. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Erla's eyes held a new warmth. "I believe," she said with a small smile, "that the ritual may not be as challenging as you feared. Dawn aboard the Astral Dominion was an artificial affair. the ship's environmental systems gradually brightening the illumination to simulate sunrise. Clyde woke slowly, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings before memories of the previous night flooded back. Erla lay beside him, her silver-white hair spread across the pillow, her blue skin a striking contrast against the cream-colored sheets. Her face in repose looked younger, the diplomatic mask set aside in sleep. Clyde found himself studying her features with a tenderness that would have been unimaginable when they'd first met. What had begun as reluctant duty had transformed into something neither of them had anticipated. Their connection had been immediate and profound, crossing the boundaries of their different species with surprising ease. Clyde had discovered that Valerian physiology, while different in coloration and certain details, was remarkably compatible with human anatomy. More surprising was the emotional resonance he'd felt, a connection that transcended the physical. Erla stirred, her sapphire eyes opening to meet his. "You're staring," she murmured, a smile playing at her lips. "Just making sure I didn't dream last night," he replied, reaching out to trace the curve of her cheek. She caught his hand, pressing it against her face. "Not a dream, though I admit I didn't expect such enthusiasm from a human." Clyde chuckled. "We're full of surprises." "Indeed." She stretched languidly, the sheet slipping to reveal the generous curves of her body. The ritual today should be a mere formality after that performance. Before Clyde could respond, his military-honed instincts alerted him to a subtle sound from the outer chamber of their suite. He placed a finger to his lips, then slipped silently from the bed, grabbing his sidearm from where he'd left it on the nightstand. Erla's eyes widened in understanding. She nodded, reaching for a small device concealed in her discarded gown. Clyde approached the door separating the bedroom from the main living area, listening intently. The soft sound came again, the unmistakable beep of someone accessing a data terminal. He signaled to Erla, who activated her device. A small holographic display appeared, showing a real-time feed from hidden security cameras in the outer room. A slender Valerian female in diplomatic attire was hunched over the suite's communication console, her back to the camera as she worked. Even from behind, Clyde recognized her. Liaison Perith, one of the junior diplomats who had been particularly attentive during the reception. "The traitor?" Erla whispered, her voice barely audible. Clyde nodded grimly. They watched as Perith inserted a data crystal into the console, her fingers moving rapidly over the interface. "She's downloading something," Clyde observed. "Probably information about the ritual today." "Or worse," Erla replied. "That terminal has access to the ship's security protocols." Clyde considered their options. "We need to take her alive. She could lead us to her contacts in House Thrax." Erla nodded in agreement. "I'll circle through the service entrance. You confront her directly." With silent efficiency born of their respective training, they moved into position. Clyde waited until Erla had slipped through a concealed door before he burst into the main chamber, weapon raised. "Don't move," he commanded. Liaison Perith spun around, her pale blue eyes widening in shock. "Captain Sutton, I was just—" "Committing treason," Clyde finished coldly. "Step away from the console." Instead of complying, Perith lunged for something at her waist. Clyde fired a warning shot that sizzled past her shoulder, scorching the wall behind her. "The next one won't miss," he warned. Perith froze, then slowly raised her hands. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "House Thrax has my bondmate. They threatened to kill him if I didn't cooperate." "A convenient excuse," Erla said, emerging from the service entrance behind Perith, her own weapon trained on the diplomat. "House Thrax doesn't take hostages. They buy loyalty with credits." Perith's expression hardened, the frightened facade dropping away. "You know nothing of their methods. They've evolved beyond your outdated intelligence." "Then enlighten us," Clyde suggested, keeping his weapon steady. "Who's your contact? What were you sending them?" A bitter laugh escaped the diplomat. "You think I fear your human weapons? Death would be preferable to what House Thrax does to traitors who fail." Before either of them could react, Perith bit down hard on something in her mouth. Her body immediately went rigid, blue foam bubbling from her lips as she collapsed to the floor. "Poison capsule!" Erla exclaimed, rushing forward. Clyde was already kneeling beside the convulsing diplomat, searching for a pulse. "Get a medical team!" Erla activated the emergency comm, barking orders as Clyde attempted to stabilize Perith. But within seconds, it became clear their efforts were futile. The poison was designed for rapid, irreversible effect. As Perith's body went still, Clyde noticed something clutched in her hand, the data crystal she'd removed from the console. He carefully extracted it, examining the small device. "Whatever she was after, it's on this," he said, holding it up. Erla took the crystal, her expression grim. "We need to get this to intelligence immediately." The next hour passed in a blur of security protocols and debriefings. The data crystal contained not only information about the upcoming ritual, but detailed schematics of the Astral Dominion's defensive systems and the planned route for the diplomatic fleet that would formalize the Human-Valerian alliance. With this information, House Thrax could coordinate a devastating attack, Chancellor Morath said gravely as they reviewed the findings in the Secure Intelligence Center. "The ritual must proceed as scheduled, but we'll need to alter our security protocols and fleet movements." "What about Perith's claim that Thrax has evolved their methods?" Clyde asked. "Could they have infiltrated other parts of your government?" The Chancellor exchanged concerned glances with his security advisors. "It's possible. We've long assumed House Thrax operated primarily through financial incentives. If they've begun using coercion and hostage-taking, our counterintelligence efforts may be compromised." "We should proceed with the honey trap strategy Captain Sutton suggested," Erla proposed. "Feed different information to different departments, see which version reaches Thrax." "Agreed," Morath said with a nod. "But this complicates matters for your ritual today. If there are other traitors aboard, you could both be at risk during the ceremony." Clyde straightened, a determined set to his jaw. "Then we use that to our advantage. Make it known that the ritual will include the formal unveiling of the Alliance's military strategy. That should draw out any remaining agents." Erla looked at him with a mixture of pride and concern. "You're suggesting we use ourselves as bait." "It's what I'm trained for," Clyde replied with a confidence that surprised even himself. What had begun as a reluctant arrangement had somehow transformed into a cause he was willing to risk his life for. Or perhaps, he realized as he met Erla's gaze, it was someone he was willing to risk his life for. Chancellor Morath studied them both, then nodded decisively. "Very well. We will proceed with the ritual as scheduled, but with enhanced security measures. Captain Sutton, your tactical insights continue to impress." As they left the intelligence center to prepare for the ceremony, Erla took Clyde's hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "You've come a long way from the man who resented being locked in our quarters," she observed with a small smile. Clyde squeezed her hand gently. "Turns out being trapped with you wasn't the worst fate after all." Her expression grew more serious. "The ritual today, it's more than just ceremony now. It's a statement to House Thrax and anyone who opposes our alliance." "Then let's make it count," Clyde replied. "Show them what happens when they underestimate a human and his Valerian bride." As they returned to their quarters to prepare, Clyde found himself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought him here. What had begun as a desperate bargain, marriage for money and a ship, had evolved into something far more meaningful. The ship he'd coveted now seemed secondary to the partnership he'd found with Erla. The bonding of souls ritual awaited them, along with whatever trap House Thrax might spring. But for the first time since this arrangement began, Clyde felt not resignation but resolve. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The Great Hall of Unity aboard the Astral Dominion glowed with ceremonial light as the bonding of souls ritual reached its culmination. Clyde and Erla stood at the center of a circular platform surrounded by representatives from both species. The air was thick with anticipation and the sweet scent of Valerian ritual incense. Clyde wore a formal uniform specially designed for the occasion, midnight blue with silver accents that complemented Erla's traditional bonding attire. Her voluptuous figure was draped in layers of shimmering fabric that caught the light with every movement, making her appear to be wrapped in liquid starlight. "The physical union has been confirmed," announced the elder officiant, a venerable Valerian with pale blue skin that had faded with age. He held up a small crystal vial containing the biochemical proof of their compatibility. evidence of their intimate connection the night before. The souls have spoken through the body's wisdom. A murmur of approval rippled through the assembled dignitaries. Clyde caught Rila's eye, sharing a private smile at the understatement. Their physical union had exceeded all expectations, crossing the boundaries between their species with a passion that had surprised them both. Chancellor Morath stepped forward, his ceremonial robes rustling softly. As the final act of bonding, the pair will now share the draft of unity, binding their life forces in the ancient way. An attendant presented an ornate chalice filled with luminescent blue liquid. Clyde knew this was the moment. The trap they had set was about to be sprung. Intelligence had identified 2 more suspected traitors among the diplomatic corps. Each department had been fed different information about the ritual, including a false detail that the draft of unity would contain a data microfiche with the Alliance's complete military strategy. Only the traitors would know this particular falsehood. Clyde took the chalice first, as tradition dictated. He raised it in a toast to the assembled crowd before taking a careful sip. The liquid tasted of sweet berries with an undertone of something more complex, not unpleasant, but decidedly alien. As he passed the chalice to Arila, his enhanced peripheral vision caught a subtle movement near the eastern entrance. One of the Valerian diplomats was reaching inside his ceremonial robe. Clyde gave the prearranged signal, a slight adjustment of his collar. Immediately, hidden security personnel moved into position. Their movements so smooth and practiced, they barely disturbed the ceremony. Arila drank from the chalice, her eyes never leaving his. When she lowered it, she spoke the traditional words with perfect clarity. 2 bodies, 2 minds, 1 path forward. Clyde responded with the human vow they had incorporated into the ceremony. In battle and in peace, my strength is yours. The moment the words left his lips, chaos erupted at the eastern entrance. The suspect diplomat drew a concealed weapon, but before he could aim it, security personnel had him pinned to the ground. Simultaneously, at the western entrance, another diplomat made a break for the exit, only to be smoothly intercepted by human security officers. Chancellor Morath's voice cut through the momentary confusion. The ceremony continues, he declared firmly, a subtle signal to the guests that the disturbance was anticipated and controlled. The ritual proceeded with dignified precision despite the quiet removal of the traitors. Clyde and Arila completed the final symbolic gestures, the crossing of arms, the exchange of personal tokens, the sealing of vows with a kiss that sent an unexpected jolt of electricity through Clyde's body. The bond is complete, the elder officiant proclaimed, recognized by all houses of Valeria and the United Earth government. Applause filled the hall as Clyde and Arila turned to face the assembled dignitaries as an officially recognized couple. The trap had worked perfectly. The remaining traitors exposed. The ceremony successfully completed. 3 days later, Clyde stood on the observation deck of the stellar venture, watching as the combined human-Valerian fleet moved into position. The intelligence they had fed to House Thrax through their captured agents had worked perfectly. The mercenary forces had committed to an ambush point where the Alliance fleet was supposedly vulnerable, only to find themselves outgunned and surrounded. The final reports are in, Arila said, joining him at the viewport. She had abandoned her formal attire for a more practical jumpsuit that still managed to accentuate her curves. House Thrax's mercenary fleet has surrendered. Their leadership is being taken into custody as we speak. Clyde nodded, satisfaction warming his chest. And the mysterious backers beyond the outer rim? Still a concern, but without House Thrax as their proxy, they've lost their foothold in this sector. She moved closer, her shoulder brushing against his. The Alliance is secure. So what happens now? Clyde asked, turning to face her fully. That depends, she replied, her sapphire eyes studying him intently. The week is up, Captain Sutton. As per our original agreement, you're free to take the stellar venture and go wherever you wish. Your family's debts have been cleared, your obligations fulfilled. Clyde glanced around the bridge of the ship that was now legally his. It was everything he had hoped for when he'd agreed to this arrangement. Sleek, powerful, state-of-the-art. His ticket to freedom and a new life among the stars. Yet the thought of leaving Arila behind created an unexpected hollow feeling in his chest. What if I don't want to leave? He asked quietly. A smile bloomed across her face, transforming her features with genuine joy. Then I would say the lock on our quarters served its purpose after all. Clyde laughed, pulling her into his arms. You planned this from the beginning, didn't you? Locking me in was never just about ensuring I fulfilled the contract. Let's say I had hopes, she admitted, her arms encircling his waist, though I didn't anticipate Krell attacks, traitors, or ancient bonding rituals. No regrets? He asked, suddenly serious. In answer, Erla rose on her toes to kiss him deeply. When they finally parted, she whispered against his lips, None whatsoever. Clyde held her close, marveling at the strange path that had led him here. What had begun as a desperate bargain, a marriage of convenience with an alien woman he'd never met, had transformed into something genuine and profound. So, he said, gesturing to the ship around them, where shall we go first? It is our honeymoon, after all. Erla's eyes sparkled with mischief. I've always wanted to explore the Cygnus Nebula. They say the radiation creates the most spectacular light shows. The Cygnus Nebula it is, Clyde agreed, moving to the navigation console. Though fair warning, I may get us lost on purpose. I've developed a certain fondness for being locked in small spaces with you. Erla laughed, the sound filling the bridge with warmth. In that case, Captain Sutton, I suggest you set a very long course. As the stellar venture broke formation from the fleet and set course for the distant nebula, Clyde reflected on the unexpected turns his life had taken. He had married an alien woman to escape poverty and win a spaceship, only to discover that the greatest prize was the bond they had formed. The ship accelerated smoothly into faster-than-light travel, stars stretching into streaks of light around them. Clyde pulled Erla close, their silhouettes merging against the cosmic backdrop. You know, he murmured against her silver-white hair, being locked in with you turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. Erla smiled up at him, her blue fingers intertwining with his human ones. Then perhaps we should make it permanent. As the stellar venture carried them toward new adventures, Clyde knew with absolute certainty that he had found something far more valuable than freedom or wealth. He had found a partner who challenged him, supported him, and saw beyond the differences of their species to the connection that truly mattered. The stars beckoned, and this time they would face them together.